Welcome back to A Little Bit of Cheese, your daily bite-sized Wisconsin sports podcast. I'm your host, Cody Depius, and I thank you for being here with us once again today as Matt Arnold hosted his postseason press conference there for the Milwaukee Brewers, and we got a few questions answered that were, of course, still lingering in the air after the loss to the Mets just a little bit under a week ago. And the big one really is what is going to happen with Devin Williams, as they asked a few questions surrounding that, where one of the quotes, I believe, mentioned Williams and said that he was so good at the end of last year that you don't want to judge his season on just one pitch. But they also asked if there was going to be a possibility that Devin Williams could be traded this offseason. And to put it blunt, the quote, I'm actually going to pull it up here for you guys. I don't want to botch this. As he said that they are going to stay open-minded. He said, quote, "We have to stay open-minded. We're the smallest market in the league, so that's something that's required in this." And that is after he was asked if there was a possibility that Devin Williams might be traded. So that kind of opens up this can of worms here that was opened up, of course, last offseason where the Brewers traded away Corbin Burnes a year before he would have been a free agent. They traded away Josh Hader a year and a half before he would become a free agent. And if you're going to ask me, I think this would be the time to trade Devin Williams. It's tough to look at it because you have one of the best, if not the best, closers in all of baseball. And, of course, that would help you go and give yourself a better chance to win a World Series next year, which I think the Brewers are going to have an opportunity to do so. But I think that you're going to be able to get something in return, and I am not worried about the Brewers not being able to find another guy to step into that bullpen and to be effective. I think, and it's what you saw this past postseason. It's a toss-up. It really is. When it gets to the bottom line, you could have someone who plays perfect all season, and then if it gets to one playoff game, it can be a win-or-go-home game, and they just don't play like that. And it could be the opposite. It could be someone who played poorly throughout the regular season, and then they just have that one moment when it comes to the playoffs. And it's the luck of the draw. Of course, you're going to have a better chance with the good player having a good game when it comes to the playoffs, but I think it gets ticky-tacky, and it could go either way, and I don't put as much value on relief pitchers as other people probably do. I don't think, of course, it's important to have someone at the back end of your bullpen that can go in and get the job done. But I think the Brewers, in all reality, there's probably 5 or 6 guys that are going to compete for those last 3 spots in the bullpen. And that could even be without Devin Williams, where if they go out and they trade him away, where maybe they go and they try to get maybe a third baseman, or maybe another arm. Who knows what they would try to get in return. But if you can get enough value, as Matt Arnold stated here, they have to keep their minds open because you have to take the value if the value's there. Devin Williams, his qualifying offer next year, actually this year, is a pretty decent one in the sense it will be $21.05 million this year. That's going to rise by this time next year. Edwin Diaz, for instance, the Mets closer, has a $20.4 million qualifying offer this year, and Josh Hader got $19 million from the Astros. So Devin Williams is going to be one of the highest paid closers, if not the highest paid reliever in all of baseball. And I don't know how much you want to. I don't know if $20 million is worth it for a guy who might pitch 2 or 3 innings over the course of a week. That's just where I stand. So if they're going to be able to get value out of that, and that's a whole philosophy, how much you value relief pitchers. Personally, I don't. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the Brewers always seem to find somebody that can lock down that back end of the bullpen in some capacity. Of course, there have been some Brewers teams that struggled to, but as of recent years, you have just been blessed with guys that have been able to get the job done. Trevor McGill was one of them this year. He pitched almost as well as Devin Williams has. He is. I think he's that caliber of a pitcher. I think he's that good. I think he can step into that closer role when it comes to the seventh and eighth innings. I think Jacob Mizorowski, who is the Brewers, one of the top Brewers prospects, a really hard-throwing, tall, right-handed pitcher. They are thinking of possibly bringing him up for bullpen help at the end of this year. They didn't do so, but you have him, you have Craig Yoho, and you already got all the guys that created one of the best bullpens in all of baseball. And this was without Devin Williams. They were able to have a top 5 bullpen without Devin Williams this past year, which I think signs just point to, if you're able to get value out of Devin Williams, just go trade him. That's where I stand on that. Other news, there is no big injury to William Contreras, as we all saw in that last playoff game. He had a brace on his left leg. He looked really, really banged up, to be honest. Sam and I talked about that earlier this week on Monday. There's a little bit of concern there, not too much, and really the bottom line, we don't have to worry about him. They're not going to need to rehab over the offseason. I bet he would have continued to play if the Brewers would have ended up winning that series against the New York Mets, which I didn't say this before, but surprise, surprise, the Mets have officially won the National League Division Series against the Philadelphia Phillies, and they'll be moving on to the National League Championship Series, and they will take on either the Dodgers or the Padres. We'll find that out tonight, but the Phillies are keeping the Brewers' curse alive, where they have an opportunity to once again go to the World Series, like every other team that has ever beat the Brewers in the playoffs. Some other news, which I'll talk about this more as the offseason goes along, about what's going to happen in the Brewers trying to replace Willy Adames. I kind of stated before, Joey Ortiz is expected to move to shortstop because Willie, he's going to go to some team that's going to give him a lot of money that the Brewers don't have. So there's going to be a hole then at third base with Joey Ortiz moving to shortstop. And it was actually stated by Pat Murphy that Sal Frelick is going to have an opportunity to play third base for the Brewers once again. That happened last spring training where they kind of tried him out. They didn't feel comfortable enough to move forward with it, and Joey Ortiz ended up playing really, really solid defensively and was pretty good with the bat as well. But if you can put Frelick at third base, even to platoon, I think that could help the team a lot and give more opportunities to somebody else, which I personally, what I would do, I would go and try and shop and try to go buy a third baseman off of the free agent market, similar to what the Brewers did last year with Rhys Hoskins finding a first baseman. Now you have that hole at third base. You can use guys within the system. I think most of them are pretty far away. Tyler Black is going to be an option. They tried him a little bit this year. They usually only put him at first base. Defensively at third, he's not great. He's really not that great at first base either, but he's pretty solid with the bat. We'll see how that goes. But then a bunch of young kids that are pretty raw yet in the minors, and we'll talk more about them. I don't want to bore you with any of that. When it comes to Packers news, nothing really that big. Just things are going smoothly after the Romeo Doubs situation. Christian Watson said there might be some bumps in the road when it comes to getting that family feeling of togetherness back in that wide receiver room, but nothing else. It was just, he said that there might be some bumps in the road, which I don't expect anything to come of it. That's kind of what I talked about yesterday, as the Packers just getting set to take on the Cardinals at noon on Sunday. Kyler Murray is one of those dynamic quarterbacks in the NFL. He can really get it done with his legs, and he's pretty solid slinging it through the air too. So they're going to have a little bit to deal with there when they play Arizona. That's kind of the Packers talk for today. We'll go through the full injury report tomorrow, but where it looks like for Green Bay, I think it's a lot of thumbs up. The one we talked about yesterday, Devontae Wyatt, he had his ankle injury. It is reported now. I did do a little bit of reading. I promised I would. I did. Devontae Wyatt is out of his boot, so that is step number one, that he's not going to be playing football in a boot. So now that that's off, things can start to progress. I'd say another 3 weeks, you should feel comfortable in seeing Devontae Wyatt, and maybe even a little bit sooner from that. But I'm not his doctor. I don't have an exact number, but that's where my expectation is for Devontae Wyatt. I have the official betting line now for the Wisconsin Badgers on Saturday. So they'll be traveling to Rutgers to take on the Scarlet Knights. Rutgers this year, they're actually favored by 2.5 points at home against Wisconsin. So this is seen as a pretty even game as it stands. Of course, Rutgers 4-1 on the season so far. They're 1-1 in the Big Ten, where Wisconsin is 3-2 overall. And Rutgers, of course, playing at home. This is one of the best Rutgers teams that they've had, maybe ever, or at least in my recent memory. Rutgers has historically been a rough football program. Last year, Wisconsin played a really, really sloppy game. I was there at it, and they were able to beat Rutgers 24-13. But now, with the game being at Rutgers, of course, the Badgers, they're starting running back in Ches Malusi out. Tyler Van Dyke has been out with ACL since the Alabama game. They're a little bit banged up. But with Rutgers being favored by 2.5, I don't want to get confident in Bucky anymore, but I think that they might start to surprise some people a little bit. They played really good in that first half against USC, but just fell apart in the second. They just got to keep things consistent half by half. You can't, if you start hot, you got to at least be able to hold it to some type of a standard when it comes to the second half. And then the Badgers started off pretty slow against Purdue, where Braden Locke had 2 interceptions pretty early into the game. Then they got hot in the second half. Let's see some more consistency from the first quarter through the fourth quarter, and that's when this team's going to start winning a lot more ball games in terms of Wisconsin. So if I was a betting man, which I'm not, I would take Wisconsin, but they might make me turn it on when it comes to Saturday. Another fun kind of story here is I always like to poke fun at LeBron James, of course, the superstar for the Los Angeles Lakers. I don't need to say anything about him. Everybody knows about him, but he tweeted earlier this week that he was frustrated that they have to fly all the way to Milwaukee for a preseason game. He tweeted, quote, "Can someone please explain to me why we're getting on a plane emoji and heading to Milwaukee for one preseason game?" And some of the responses are pretty funny. One of them said, well, it would take 29 hours to drive, so I'm guessing your coaches thought it would be more efficient to fly. And I found that one pretty funny. But LeBron James does not want to fly a plane to Milwaukee for a preseason game, even though that's kind of what happens every single year is NBA teams play each other before the regular season, and that's what the preseason's called. And you usually have to travel to go play these teams like you would in the regular season as well. I don't know. LeBron's just being whiny. That's kind of what he's been known for throughout his career. Great basketball player, but boy, he likes to complain, and it's really frustrating for him and that he has to fly all the way to Milwaukee for a preseason game. So everyone give your sympathies to LeBron James as he's really going through it, and they're putting him through so much. I know it's really hard times out there in LA for you, LeBron, having to fly halfway across the country. I'm so sorry, brother. Tonight, really good Thursday night football game that I'll be watching. The 49ers will be at Seattle taking on the Seahawks. This is a pretty interesting game. 2-3 49ers. They have not lived up to expectations with Christian McCaffrey out due to injury. And the Seahawks started off 3-0, but they've had a rough past 2 weeks. They lost to the New York Giants last week. And due to that, I am going to take the San Francisco 49ers. I think that team is a lot better than they've been playing up to in that standard. But I will be watching that game tonight, and might recap it a little bit tomorrow. We'll see if anything exciting happens, but I'm your host, Cody Depius. I once again want to thank you for being with us once again today, as we will be back for tomorrow's Friday edition of A Little Bit of Cheese, your daily bite-sized Wisconsin sports podcast.